Alright, today I'm going to show you pretty much everything you need to know about 3D in After Effects as of April 2025. Now, before we do get started, we do have to do some Blender prep. I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, you probably picked up a 3D asset online, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how you would clean it up, probably using Blender because After Effects can't really do the cleanup stuff just yet. Blender is a big 3D package that you can do a lot of cool stuff with. You could also use Cinema 4D or Maya, etc., but I'm assuming if you're an After Effects user, you probably want the free version or the free option to edit your stuff. So that being said, to just quickly navigate, if you hold the middle mouse button and click, you can orbit around your scene. If you hold shift and middle mouse button, you can pan your camera. And if you hold control and middle mouse button click, you can zoom in and out. That being said, let's go ahead and find a 3D object that we're working with. I'm going to go up to File, Import, and we'll see all these different file types. Now, if you've never used 3D before ever, there's a ton of different file types, kind of like what you might see from a JPEG or a PNG, etc. 3D is the same way, and the file that we're going to be working with today is a GLB that I downloaded from Sketchfab, and then I did some minor edits for this tutorial because licensing reasons. And then if you do buy most other 3D objects, they'll typically come in an FBX or an OBJ. So I know I'm going to be using a GLB, so I'm going to go ahead and select this and find my object. This is the managerial ring. We'll go ahead and import this, and we can see that we have our object. Now, I am in a mode called material mode right here. If you look at the top right-hand corner, we can see all the different modes of our viewport. So typically, it might come in this like really flat grayscale looking image, but in preview mode for our materials, we can see that this ring does come in with some materials that I did edit for licensing reasons. So that being said, we have the 3D object. You've imported it. Great. What we can see here in the top right hand corner is our outliner. This is basically kind of like our project bin in After Effects, and it holds most of the stuff that you would have in a 3D scene. Now, with this 3D object that I got online, it comes in as a Sketchfab model, but if we select this little drop down, we can see that there's this nonsense, and then we select this drop down and there's this nonsense, and we go all the way down until we find the triangle. That is your 3D object. This is what we want. So what we're going to do is with our mouse cursor over our viewport and the selected 3D object with the triangle, we're going to hold Alt and then hit the P key on our keyboard, and we're going to select Clear Parent and Keep Transform. The reason why we do that is we don't need all these other little null objects. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is that we can see here that this ring is kind of floating off of this grid floor plane. And if we import the model as is into After Effects, it's going to be a nightmare to animate because the anchor point is incorrect. It's in the wrong position. We want it to be in the center of the world with no rotation. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and make those changes, and we can go ahead and start by selecting this Sketchfab model null. It's called an empty in Blender, but we're going to call it a null for my After Effects users. Hold shift, select the bottom little animation thing right there, and then we're going to hit the X key on the keyboard to get rid of that nonsense. We don't need it anymore. Now we can see here we have this one ring 3D object. With my cursor over my viewport, I'm going to hit the N key on the keyboard, and we can see here all the different properties under the item property window here. Now, I want to make sure that everything is zeroed out, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that the X, Y, and Z is 0, and then for the rotation, I'm also going to select this, hit 0, hit Tab, 0, Tab, 0, Tab, 0. Awesome. Hit Enter. From here, we can see that the scale is a little off. It's not quite perfectly round. So instead of zeroing this out or setting this to 1, 1, 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control A on the keyboard, and I don't want to do any actual adjustments to this because if I do this, it'll squash it and stretch it, and that's going to do some nonsense. Let's say I like the shape as is. It's exactly a ring. Amazing. So instead of adjusting this, we're going to hit Control A on the keyboard and make sure that we're applying the transforms. So we set everything to 0 here, and when we hit Control A and apply all transforms, everything is now zeroed out and ready to go. This ring is basically a ring, so we don't need to do any major editing. We can see here that it is a little faceted, and when you do get 3D models online, it's kind of what you see is what you get. So if you need to make some edits, make it feel higher quality, that's going to get into the realm of 3D modeling, which is a whole mess and another tutorial. So let's just keep going and get this ready for After Effects. To do that, what we're going to do is first double check our material. So we can see here that this object does have a material that I did edit for licensing reasons, and we want to make sure that this comes over into After Effects. The way we can check that is go to our material of our object right here, and we can see here that this object has a material called material.002. We can rename this, we'll call this the managerial ring, like that. And then we can see here that it has our metalness, how metal our object is going to be, as in how reflective, or how much of it will obey properties of metal. We have our roughness, which is actually how reflective it will be, and then a couple other things here. Now, the 3D model that I did get online, it did have an emission material, and we're not going to change this. We're just going to assume we're working with whatever we have. But if you need to change the materials as it imports into After Effects, this is where you would adjust those properties. The shininess, how metal it is, the color of it. I can go here and change this to like a blue ring, for example, etc. I'm going to hit Control Z on the keyboard and undo that. And now let's export this for After Effects. We'll go up to File, Export, GLB. As of April 2025, while I'm recording this tutorial, you cannot import any other file into After Effects. I really want them to bring in an FBX, but maybe someday. We'll export a GLB, and we will go ahead and save this. Now, I'm going to save this as a new file called the Managerial Ring Edits by Jags. This is the stuff that I'm doing to it because we don't want the crazy nonsense that imported previously. So I'm going to go ahead and export that, and now we can finally go to After Effects, go ahead and close Blender. Alright, so I'm in After Effects now. I have this little composition where we're going to do a quick ring transition. So we're going to go to File, Import, and we're going to find the file that we just edited and made. I have my file right here, and I'm going to go ahead and import both just to show you what happens in the scenario in which we get an asset that is actually broken and is going to be hard for us to work with. First thing I'll do is I'll take the original one and just demonstrate to you that if I go ahead and drag this into a new composition, we're first going to get this little preview menu here. Normally you can just hit OK. It's asking like how big of an object do we want to make. Just keep it at 100%. Click OK. Now we can see here that there's an error for some reason. What is going on? I don't know why that happened. Anywho, first thing that's worth addressing is that if we hit the C key on the keyboard, we can go ahead and start orbiting around our camera, kind of looking around our scene. If we hit the C key again, we change to this pan tool, and when we select this, we can kind of like pan in our 3D scene, and when we hit C, we can kind of zoom in and out. Like so. Now the reason why I'm showing you this is if we go ahead and look at this 3D model, the axis point, the center, the anchor point of the 3D model is off in the middle of nowhere. Sure, we can go ahead and try and adjust it, but that is why I kind of showed you how to adjust an object in Blender, because we shouldn't have to do that. So we're going to go ahead and go to a new composition. We'll take this new one and bring it into the scene I showed you just a moment ago. So I'll double click on my actual composition, and I'll take this Managerial Ring, Edits by Jags, drop this into my comp, and then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we're using the correct renderer for our 3D object. Now that's important because we can see here in the lower right hand corner down here that it's asking us to use the 3D renderer. So we'll make sure we click OK, make sure we go ahead and select OK for this prompt. And now we can see that the lower right hand corner 3D renderer is turned on. And if we click this, we can see that the classic 3D is there, but if we select it, our 3D object is gone. So bear in mind, for this we have to use the advanced 3D renderer. Now from here we can see that the ring is in our scene. I'll go ahead and solo this by clicking on this button. From here I will go ahead and kind of just zoom out of my scene and take a look at my 3D object. It's nice and centered. We can hit the W key and start rotating this around. We can start animating this if we want to, etc, etc. Okay, cool. We have our 3D object in our scene. what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-Alt-Shift-C on the keyboard, and that is going to go ahead and make a camera. Now, if you're familiar with cameras, you can choose your focal length, etc. This is typically how you'd want to work in the 3D, and we'll just set this to like a 55 millimeter. That's one of my favorite focal lengths, and we'll hit Enter to create our 3D camera. Now, I'm not going to do any animation on my camera, but what I will do is I will go ahead and start animating this ring here. Now, if I hit the S key on my keyboard, and we can go to our scale property and scale this down, we now have our ring. If we hit the R key, we can go to our orientation and kind of just inspect our managerial ring right here. Is it doing the thing that we want? Sure, it looks fine. It's a 3D object. And as I said earlier, we're getting a little bit of faceting, but that's because the 3D object came in as is from Sketchfab. That being said, we can go ahead and start trying to make this look better. The first thing that most people will start with is try and make some lights. When we're looking at a 3D object, we can almost think of it like a stage, and our composition or our 3D scene is kind of like where we're going to place set objects, actors, etc. And this lighting here is pretty bland and basic. You can see it's pretty shiny, and the background of this light is actually like a photo studio sort of thing, but I want to make it feel a little bit more lively. To do that, we need to create some lights. So what we could do is we can hit Control, Alt, Shift, and L on the keyboard, and this will give us the ability to add lights to our scene. Now, we're going to talk about the most important one, which is going to be your environment light in a second, but most people will start with like a spotlight or a point light, which isn't a bad place to start. Let's go ahead and add a point light. That's the most default light in After Effects, and after we let it load for a second, we can see here that now our light is much darker. Once we added a light to our composition, the 3D scene was like, okay, this is the only light in our scene. We have no other lights. So we can go ahead and move this light around, and we can see how it's reflecting on our 3D ring there. We can go ahead and select our object, our light, and hit Control D, and then we can add a second light, and this should... yeah, we're getting that little reflection right there. We could hit the T key on the keyboard and increase the intensity of that light, and we could start lighting this however we want. But honestly, this is going to be way too much time, so the easiest thing to use for 3D is something called an HDRI. So that means we're going to go to the internet. And from here, we're going to type polyhaven.com like so, hit enter, and from here on this website, we can find some HDRIs. Let's go to Assets, HDRIs, and we can go ahead and search, I don't know, indoor, because the shots that we're using from the footage is an indoor scene, so we can find something that kind of matches that style. Ideally, you would use light from the actual space that you shot in, but hey, this is what we're working with. So abandoned games room, sure, that also kind of sounds like I was shooting something at Gen Con, so I'll go ahead and select this. And the most important thing is that we need to make sure we're using the correct file format. So we need to make sure that we set this to an HDR right here, and then download 4K, 8K, 16K. Download the 4K one. 4K will be just enough, but it's not going to blow up your computer. Go ahead and hit download, and it's going to go ahead and ask us to save it somewhere on our computer. Let's go ahead and do that. I have a folder here, and I'll just right click, add a new folder, and we'll call this HDRI, hit enter, enter, and save. Cool. Back in After Effects, we'll go to File, Import, find our HDRI. You could just drag it into the bin. I'll go here, drag in HDRI. Now from here, we're going to go down to our HDRI into our composition, put it at the very bottom. Doesn't really matter. I have caps lock on, so we'll hit caps lock, turn that off, and now we have this HDRI in our scene. And it's not really doing much. Now the reason why is, first, it's just creating a background image, but it's actually not applying light. So what I'm going to do is delete this second point light, and then I'm going to double click on the first point light, and I'll bring up the light properties again, and I'm going to change the light type from point to environment. Now from here, we can see that, oh my god, the lighting change is kind of back to where we started. Now from here, when we look under the environment light options, we have the source. And the source, we can set this to the .hdr file. And it's very important that's a .hdr file. So once that's done and we select that HDR, we can see here that the light is kind of reflecting that HDRI, and the HDRI is now invisible. We're not seeing it in our scene, but it's going to represent the light on our 3D object. I do think it's a little bright personally. So I'll go to my HDRI, my environment light here, and bring down the intensity to like, I don't know, 50%. And sure, that looks fine for me. Amazing. So now from here, I can go ahead and unsolo this, and now we have our ring in our 3D scene, but it's kind of just chilling there. From this point on, it's pretty much just animating something in After Effects. So what I'm going to do here is take a second, animate it, and then I'll show you how to do the transition from this clip to the next clip. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and zero out my orientation like so, and then I'm going to hit Control-Alt-Shift-Y on my keyboard and create a null object. And from here, we'll hit Enter with the null object selected, and we'll call this 3D animation null, or whatever you want to call it. And then I'm going to take this, put it on top of my 3D object, and I'm going to parent my 3D object to the null. So all of my animation is going to live under this null. This is just how I like to work. You could do it on the 3D object if you want to. From here, what I'll do is I will bring my playhead to the very center, and I will hold Shift and page down twice, and that will bring my playhead 10 frames backwards, and I will hit the P key on the keyboard, add a keyframe for position, and then I will hold Shift and page up 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and then I will add another position keyframe, and then I will add a position keyframe at the very center, like so. Now, before I actually start animating this, I do want to make sure I set this to a 3D object. So now my null is going to do all of my 3D position data for this ring. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, on frame 0, bring it all the way down like so. So it's kind of out of my frame. And then I'm going to go ahead and right click on my position property and go to separate dimensions right here. And this is just how I like to work. And then I'm going to go to my center frame right here. And then under the Y property, I'll set this back to 1080, 540. So now it's at the center of my scene. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and go to my Z property at the very last keyframe, and then I'm going to kind of scale this up and fill my entire frame until it's completely out of my scene. Now what I will also do is from here, I will go ahead and add a rotation keyframe to all of my rotation properties. So I will select my 3D animation null, hit the R key on the keyboard, add a keyframe there, and then hit the U key on the keyboard, so then I can get access to all of my keyframes. And I will go to the last keyframe by moving my playhead and then set my rotation. I think it's going to be the Y. Yes, I want the Y. I want this to do a 180-degree turn, so I'll set this to like 180, like so, and then drag this around. So now we have this cool little spin sort of thing. I realize my Y position property kind of did a weird, so we're going to go ahead and push this back down, and now we get an animation kind of like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and finesse this animation just a little bit so it doesn't look as boring, so I'll select all these keyframes, ease them, and give me a second.
6.5 hours later.
So after about 5 minutes, we have an animation that kind of looks like this. Oh, come on. Play. There we go. Cool, the ring comes in. So now we need to set up this transition and finish this tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and leave my solo mode right here, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my footage is going to match my transition. So I want this bottom clip here, this time lapse that I have, to go for the full duration as we see the ring, and I want this second clip to come in immediately when this ring is obscured through we have a completely, like, almost perpendicular view to the camera. And the reason why that's valuable is we can now use this to create either a mask, but that'd be a huge fat waste of time, or a shape layer. So what I'm going to do is with my shape tool up here, I'll double click on this, and under my properties tab over here, I'm going to unparent my size and set this to 1080 by 1080. So now we have a perfect circle in our shape layer, and we're going to go ahead and set this to a 3D layer. Now it's going to get a little dark because it's absorbing the light from the scene, but that's okay. We just need this to create our matte or our mask. So with this shape layer, we'll call it shape_matte. And then we're going to go ahead and hold Shift, and with the parent tool, parent this to the 3D animation null. So now when I do that, the shape layer is going to snap directly to the center of that ring. So if I go ahead and play this back, we can see here that this ring kind of comes in and we have our cool little shape layer, but it's extending beyond the bounds of our ring. So I'll go ahead and relink my size and then just scale this down until it's only in the center of the ring. Last thing I need to do is I need to go to my second clip right here, and then I just need to make sure that this, the track matte, is set to my shape matte. So now when I do that and I go ahead and play this back, the ring is going to come up into my scene and animate. I'm going to let this RAM preview. And with my RAM preview done, we can see here that the footage is going to play, the ring is going to come up, and then it's going to spin towards the camera and fully fill the frame, and now we have that transition done. And now you can pretty much do 3D transitions in After Effects super easy, and I'm really stoked about this because as much as I use Unreal and Blender and Cinema 4D and Maya and it's a lot easier to do in After Effects if you just need to do a quick thing. So, I hope this tutorial was helpful. If it was, let me know in the comment section down below. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever else. Comment section is down there for that as well. And I should mention that if you are confused by any of this, I do one-on-one artist coaching and tutoring and all of that. So you can see links for that. I'm just going to shamelessly self-plug that. So if you are confused and need some help, do let me know. And with that, I will leave you with the final tip. As always, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight makes some. Goodbye, my friends. Bye.